As we wrap up the month of March, I'm reminded of all the craziness that happened in March 5 years ago, and grateful not to see something like that again. 5 years ago at this point, we were somewhere in the 15 days to flatten the curve, which of course turned out to take a lot longer than 15 days. 5 years ago, when schools were on spring break, we had no idea when they would be back in person again. This year, thank God, kids and teachers were able to enjoy a normal spring break. 5 years ago, the NCAA basketball tournament was canceled. This year, we got to see the Razorbacks make a nice run into the Sweet 16. So there's a lot to be thankful for right now. Besides all of those closures 5 years ago, another thing I remember is how some people wanted to see the COVID outbreak as a punishment for something that we had done. Early in the pandemic, when the strongest concentration of cases was in New York City, I was sad to hear someone remark that it was clearly a punishment because the people in New York were known to be just so sinful. Now, one major problem with that statement is that it greatly ignored our own sinfulness and ignored the holy lives that were undoubtedly being led in places struck by the virus. Think of the healthcare workers and the others who worked so hard in caring for others. Another problem with that line of thinking would manifest itself some months later when the virus situation more or less reversed, when we had a lot of cases in the South and fewer in places like New York, without any obvious change in the moral status of either place. At various times in human history, we see unjust suffering we can't explain, and we want to find reasons for it. We want the world to make sense. So the question of why bad things happen to good people is a question that is ancient, yet is always new. It's ancient in the sense that it's been asked again and again, probably since the beginning of time. It's always new in the sense that we continue to ask it. We continue to be confronted by that question when bad things happen in life. We continue to want some justice or fairness in every situation. And that's why horrible tragedies tear at our hearts so much. We sympathize with those who suffer, but we also find that such tragedies remind us that we live in a broken, messed up world. At various times in the ancient world, people attempted to answer the question of bad things happening to good people by suggesting that some wrong deed, possibly unknown to others, was the cause of whatever suffering was taking place. Take, for example, what we heard in our gospel reading today. There's a reference to this man born blind as someone who was born totally in sin. The idea being that his blindness was the fault of his sin. And in fact, there's another verse nearby that has the disciples asking Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? There's a taking for granted here that there's a connection between the man's blindness and someone's sin, perhaps his own or perhaps that of his parents. Now, Jesus does not go into detail in his response. He simply says instead that the man was born blind so that the works of God might be made visible through him. Jesus does not get concerned here with the man's background. Instead, he gives the man the gift of sight and later uses this experience to remind us that we can be spiritually blind even if we have good natural eyesight. Where are we blind spiritually? Do we fail to see God's action within us or among our neighbors? Do we fail to see God working through others in life? Do we fail to see where God is working within us and moving us to do his will? Today, we have the second scrutiny for those who will be baptized at Easter this year. As we do, we recognize that they will receive the gift of spiritual sight at their baptism. We recognize how all of us are spiritually blind at some point in our lives and how much we need that gift of spiritual sight if we are to live truly as children of God. Science would be able to explain the physical causes of the blindness of the man in our gospel reading today. But knowing why he was born blind would be the greater challenge. Some of the most difficult questions to answer are why some things happen in God's universe, especially the question of why bad things happen to good people. Nonetheless, we know for certain that good things do indeed come from God. And we know that spiritual sight, the true sight by which we can see the goodness of God around us, that true sight comes from God Himself and is available to us if we are ready to accept it.